It would take a shocking turn of events in December for this to be anything other than the fewest sales across the region in more than 20 years.
Interest rates have come down.
Yeah.
Like housing is more affordable.
People that wanted 2-year ago pricing are getting a bit more realistic.
There's a relationship between what happens in Whistler's real estate market and what's happening, say, in the stock market.
Obviously, a lot of people's homes in Whistler are secondary homes. So, be told how much you have to use it is a hard thing to swallow for some people that are overseas.
Welcome to the Rennie Podcast, your guide to what's happening in the real estate market in Greater Vancouver. I'm Ryan Berlin, head economist and vice president of intelligence at Rennie.
And I'm Ryan Wyse, market intelligence manager and lead analyst at Rennie. And you wrote a joke for me, Ryan.
I didn't write anything.
Basically, the guy who stares at charts so you don't have to.
There you go. That could be part of your title.
Okay, I like that. Thank you.
Today's extra special guest, making her long overdue debut, I would say.
Yeah,
because I actually thought you had been on before and we were chatting and it was like, oh, Carleigh's never been on.
Never leave Whistler,
Yeah. So December would have been the perfect time to have you on, but it's just pouring rain.
Yes, indeed. So Carleigh Hofman.
Yes.
Carleigh Hofman, Whistler real estate expert and top performing Rennie advisor. You're pretty famous in Whistler, but for just a few listeners and watchers who don't know you, what's your story?
My name's Carleigh Hofman. I actually started my real estate journey in West Vancouver. Obviously very familiar with Rennie because of that and was always very impressed with their marketing and everything you guys do. And then naturally it has progressed to Whistler and it felt like the right fit for me to be there. So it's been a great time for me up at Rennie Whistler. And Whistler's happy to have Rennie there.
Awesome.
We're happy to have you.
Yeah.
And we're happy to be in Whistler. So outside we have an atmospheric river, I think. Like they didn't call it that when we were kids. I don't think, right? Like they're not a new phenomenon. It's just like a lot of rain. Yeah.
But when we were kids, like rivers were only on the ground where they belonged.
Now they're in the sky.
In the streets.
Climate change.
On the mountains also right now, which isn't ideal.
So that's what I was going to ask you is if it's raining, like I always think here when it's raining, at sea level, that the North Shore Mountains, if you can't see the tops of them, are probably getting some snow in the winter. That doesn't necessarily apply to, like you can't extrapolate rain here to lots of snow in Whistler.
Well, yesterday it was raining in the valley, but I actually did go up the mountain to go skiing and it was a winter wonderland. So you just never know. Right. Sometimes you got to get above the clouds to really know what's going on. Yeah.
Right on. Well, thanks for being here.
Yes, thanks for having me.
For braving the rain. There's a lot we want to cover today, including the latest in our real estate market here in the southwest corner of BC's mainland, and that includes Whistler. So we'll talk specifically about Whistler and also Squamish, and then also some of the big picture stuff. So Metro Vancouver's labor market, there was a recently released federal budget and updated immigration levels plan we'll touch on, and then we'll talk about what it all means for interest rates potentially in 2026. Okay, let's talk about the market. We're 11 months into what has been a choose your adjective, tumultuous, frustrating, bottom scraping 2025. In November, Mr. Wyse, what did you see? Was it sort of more of the same from the prior 10 months, or was there anything that sort of jumped off the page at you?
So high level, I'd say more of the same. The last few months, it's been a couple months since we've actually just talked about the local market on this podcast. But the last few months have been pretty slow. So we had around 2,700 sales across the region in November, 16% less than last year, 28% below average. I think all of the past few months have been close to around 30% below average. So through 11 months of the year, like with only December left, and December, of course, is typically quite slow, we know kind of how this year has gone and where we're going to finish.
And it's not looking, from a total transaction perspective, it's not looking great.
No, it would take a shocking turn of events in December for this to be anything other than the fewest sales across the region in more than 20 years.
I mean, and we know
except for Whistler.
Okay.
We'll get there. We know because we track this stuff on a daily basis that things are not going gangbusters here in December in the first, 8 days.
Exactly. So we are just shy of 33,000 sales through 11 months, and we're probably going to finish just over 35,000. So context is Average probably close to 50, just over 50. Last 2 years, 40. And those were tough years, 20% below average, and we're nowhere close to that with only December remaining. So this is fewer than the 36,000 that we had in 2008 at the height of the Great Financial Crisis, the Great Recession. So yeah, it's a slower year than I think anyone necessarily anticipated at the start of the year. And again, yeah, more than 2-decade low.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to keep going back to it, but I just think nobody feels really confident in what the world is going to look like next year, right? So there's that uncertainty, that word again, I think is still relevant. And it feels like part of it is what's happening south of the border. It's not all of it, but it just feels very unsettled. Like, we haven't found our footing in the last year. And I think it's just keeping people on the sidelines. I mean, rates have come down. Interest rates have come down. Yeah. Like housing is more affordable today. We've talked about this on this podcast before. I think with the combination of price declines and interest rate drops, I think housing is more affordable today than it's been in 3 years, right? Something like that.
Yeah, I think there is more clarity at home. Like this time last year, the government, the prime minister resigned, the finance minister resigned. We had a caretaker government for like 4 months, and then we had an election. Like that's all been sorted. We now have our new government. They just passed a federal budget. They have all these plans, which we'll talk about in a bit, whether we like them or not. But there's a lot more certainty at home. You just mentioned interest rates. We'll talk about it more, but there's a lot more clarity around interest rates. It's that like global piece. It's everything that's happened in the U.S. that's still making things so uncertain. We don't know if we're going to have a free trade agreement this time next year or not.
So what's happening on the listing side?
The exact opposite. So new listings through 11 months of the year, already the most in 20 years. So if not a single person listed their house or condo or townhome for sale in December, we would still have a 2-decade high, an all-time high in new listings.
Wow.
So some of those will be relistings, people who didn't sell their home. It expired, put it back on the market, but that's a phenomenon that happens every year, probably more this year. But overall, those two things combined, we now have inventory that's still close to 50% above average. And there's quite a bit of seasonality with inventory. The numbers come down a lot at the end of the year, but we headed into December with more than 22,000. And we're looking at, finishing the year at a level that we've never seen before in this market.
So lots of choice.
Yeah, there you go.
Lots of choice if you're looking. So that's sort of like the 1-2 on the broad region. But this market in the Vancouver region, which extends to Pemberton, has lots of nuance within it. So within the Sea to Sky corridor, so that's like Squamish through Whistler to Pemberton, what is that market looking like? And either one of you can jump in on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I see the media headlines every single day, and to be honest, I try not to focus so much on that and try to feel what the market's doing. Obviously, as a realtor up there, I get to see firsthand kind of what's happening. Is my phone ringing? Are people asking for showings? My listing count? Yes, my listing count is up. I have listed a lot of homes this year, but I would also say we've had pretty average sales numbers as well. Obviously, coming from 2021, which was the peak, we are down a bit from that. But yeah, things are selling. And I think a lot of it is to do with, you have to get realistic with price, for one. People that wanted 2 year ago pricing are getting a bit more realistic. But I also am just seeing that there's a lot of families, for instance, in Squamish. They're getting into the home market. So there's like multiple offers happening on detached homes quite often in Squamish. And in Whistler, it's not one of those places you want to get out of. So
once you're in, yeah.
Once you're in, you want to stay in. And so it doesn't really matter what the market's doing in that capacity, because if you're selling and buying in the same market, you might sell a bit lower, but you're getting in a bit lower. And I'm just finding that that's what most people are doing. They're not actually leaving Whistler altogether. There is some people that are, aging out of Whistler because of the lifestyle, but for the most part, people, if anything, they've had a condo and now their family's gotten larger, or they're spending more time there, and they're moving up the market. So there's quite a bit of that happening through the Sea to Sky.
Right. Yeah. And for Whistler specifically, interest rates don't impact that segment of the market or that market as much as they do the rest of this region, right?
Yeah, there's things to offset those hurdles. So, we have tourism accommodation zoning. So a lot of Whistler can still be Airbnb'd. We don't have those bans. We didn't have a foreign buyer ban. So we still have foreign investment happening. We still have purchasers that are coming here that can't buy in Vancouver. And they're like, well, why wouldn't I just buy in a world-class ski resort that's an hour and a half from the city?
Yeah.
So we definitely have some, perks that make it work for people. And I think when you're looking, say you have two homes, someone's overextended, interest rates are affecting you, they might sell off their Vancouver home because they can't offset that hit with rental or, even long-term rent in Whistler, because there's no more to be built really. Like the values have just held both in rental, short-term rental, and even selling. So yeah, we've been a bit more protected there, I guess, from the interest rate hurdles.
Yeah. And then we were talking before we started recording about what you're seeing in terms of the profile of the buyer, that you are seeing there's a relationship between what happens in Whistler's real estate market and what's happening, say, in the stock market. And you're seeing buyers from Toronto sort of leveraging gains that they've made in their investments over the last couple of years and bringing that to this market.
Yeah, I think for my business especially, I obviously had a history in the stock market and finance. So prior job. So a lot of my clients are from that world. So I think that's why I see a bit more of it too. But I do see that people, right now the markets are great. I don't see a ton of people selling out right at this minute, but as they make gains, it's always this thing. Everyone wants this Whistler cabin. It's kind of this pipe dream for especially Vancouver residents. They all want their second home. And I do see a close correlation to the stock market having gains and people pulling out some money and buying in Whistler. That definitely is happening quite a bit.
And checking that one off the bucket list, right? Buying real estate in Whistler.
Yeah, it's an important thing in life, Yeah.
What about sort of data wise?
Yeah.
What are you seeing? Like, how would you describe Sea to Sky?
Yeah. Like, we talk so much about the overall market, the high level stuff, but within that market, there's, 26 different MLS sub areas. And so Squamish, for example, has been I guess you'd say, quote, best performing MLS area in the Vancouver region. So sales are up year over year, 15%. They're only 7% below average. It's the closest to average of any submarket in the region. Whistler a bit less, like 4% down year over year. But when we're talking about these like huge declines in transaction activity everywhere else, or most everywhere else, I think that the Sea to Sky kind of stands out as a market that's been better performing. And I think it's interesting too, because Squamish and Whistler are also so different from each other in terms of who's buying, what the rationale is.
I think a lot of people too, like after COVID pandemic, people were able to work from home more often. Squamish has become like a vibrant young family community. I do wonder what's going to happen a little bit, because we do have a lot of pre-sales that are completing this year or in the next 6 months. So there is going to be an influx of condo inventory. Most people are completing on them. There will be an influx of rental as a result, but there's definitely the demand to fill it. Like, it seems like the demand is filling it. And that was always the question the last year was like, is there going to be enough demand to fill it? And it seems like, there is. So, and the thing about the product that's being built in Squamish is a lot of them are larger. They're built for outdoor recreation. So even people that are selling here out of a condo and say moving there to a condo, the size of them are actually quite a bit larger. You get storage. The product that was built was smartly built for recreation and for young families.
And for families.
Yeah. There's space. There's room. Unlike, in the city, they're built a little bit different. So, I just think people are moving more to places, that have, the young families. They're all moving to places that have a lot of outdoor recreation. And what better place than Squamish? You're on the ocean, waterfront. It's unbelievable. And you got the mountains in your backyard. You're 40 minutes from Vancouver. You're 40 minutes from Whistler. You're kind of smack dab in the middle. So it is a place people can live and still commute for work. It's a place people can live and have, an abundance of options for children. But it also, gets you to and from two very great places, Whistler and Vancouver.
Absolutely.
So
maybe this is a good time to shamelessly plug one of the projects that we are selling. A project called Arte in Squamish. It's 80 homes, a mix of 1 to 3 bedrooms, located in downtown Squamish. The developer's a local one, 30 Squamish. appreciates and understands the local community and needs and buyers and all of that stuff. It's currently selling, if I'm not mistaken, the first 20 deals. For the first 20 deals, you only have to put 10% down as a deposit, which is really great.
Yeah.
Kind of lowers that hurdle.
Yeah, they're very
in the
nice
near
too.
term.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that's my plug. That's one of 5 wood frame projects that's currently pre-selling in that market. It's a small market. There's not a lot happening there, but more broadly, the pre-sale market in this region has been pretty slow through
Yes.
3 quarters.
Yeah. So we don't have 20 years of historical data on this, but we are on pace for our slowest year in terms of, we'll call them new home sales. Again, so much of the new home market now is completed inventory, under construction inventory, much less pre-sale. But we are on pace for our slowest year for new home sales across this region since the data began tracking in 2012 by quite a bit. So the old record low was around 9,000 sales, and we're on pace to do maybe 6 or 7 with 1 quarter remaining. So yeah, it's a different world today, even with so much completed inventory sort of being available to a lot more of those end user buyers, those young families and stuff. We're really seeing is that people have taken a step back from that segment of the market.
So in a nutshell, where we're at now with the market has kind of been, I don't know if it's been a steady state since the start of the year, but it felt like, I know going month to month and looking at the data and talking about the market, it doesn't feel like there's been a big shift in that story throughout the year. It's just been sluggish sales, broadly speaking, talking Greater
Broad.
Vancouver.
30,000 foot
Yes.
view.
No, it's definitely been. I've never had to work harder. I'll say that it's been good, but I've never had to work harder than I have in the last probably year.
And I mean, it brings some benefits too, with prices softening a little bit, and there being more inventory. For a market that was starved for choice for so long, it's a welcome change for many people.
There's
who
opportunities in every market.
Let's pivot to the bigger picture here and talk about maybe not the market directly, but some things that impact the market. Let's start with the budget.
Okay.
I don't think we've recorded a
We
podcast
haven't.
since the budget was released. In sum, what's your takeaway?
Nothing on housing, or
Yeah,
nothing
virtually
new
nothing.
on housing. So Build Canada Homes, which was previously announced as sort of the centerpiece of the housing component to the budget. Our opinion on this is it won't have a material impact on the overall market. It will probably bring some much needed affordable housing to some communities across the country, but not a market mover per se. And there's a whole bunch of policies that were kicked around during the election that ultimately weren't included. And so there's Build Canada Homes, there's the GST rebate for first-time end-user buyers. Those are both in and proceeding. The MERB, the multi-unit residential
Benefit?
So it's should have looked that one up before we started recording. It is a purpose-built rental tax policy from the 1970s that was really instrumental in getting a lot of purpose-built rental built through tax write-offs. That was not included. There was no expansion of the GST rebate, which had been kicked around a little bit. There really wasn't much else. So don't expect a lot from the federal government on housing.
Was there
directly.
anything to do with the underused housing tax on that one?
Well, so that is going away.
Yeah.
And I think that was confusing and complicated for a lot of Canadians, redundant too in certain markets like ours here. But how about for Whistler?
It was a big thing for Whistler because obviously a lot of people's homes in Whistler are secondary homes. So, be told how much you have to use it. It's a hard thing to swallow for some people that are overseas. And the amount was not small because the value of homes, the assessed value of homes are not small in Whistler. So yeah, it definitely had a big effect on Whistler. So that will be another win for Whistler.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think
we don't have foreign buyer-ban. We don't have any, all these things. If they get taken away, it just opens another opportunity there for people. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And also DCCs.
Yes.
The government had pledged previously to reduce development cost charges associated with new development by 50%. Didn't say how they were going to do that. And then it turns out when it's time to put the budget together, they didn't want to actually answer that question or deal with it at all because they were just mum on it. So it doesn't sound like anything's happening on that front in the near term. But also along with the budget, the government released an updated immigration levels plan as it does every year. and that relates to setting targets for. Historically, it's been permanent residents. More recently, and more meaningfully, it's been non-permanent residents. So, what does that look like? Is there a material shift in how the government is viewing migration as it relates to the population and economy?
No, I would say they're taking a mulligan. So the permanent resident component is largely going to continue as it has. They sort of reinforced their permanent resident targets, pushed them out another year. So we're back to like pre-pandemic levels of permanent resident additions. For the non-permanent resident component, the goal of reducing the stock of non-permanent residents in Canada from a high of just over 7% of the population back to 5% has been pushed out by a year. So they've made almost no progress in the first year of this commitment. And so instead of trying to complete this by the end of 2026, they're now going to attempt to do it by the end of 2027, which still means a net outflow of like 1 million people in 2 years.
Right. Over 2 years.
Yeah. Which was the original target, which we've had a net outflow of like 50,000 people over 1 year. So lots more work to be done. I'm a little bit skeptical they can achieve it, but if they do, it means population loss in 2026 and 2027.
So pushing that out, because previously we were expecting population declines in Canada and in Metro Vancouver in 25 and 26. But now we still have 2 years of loss, just pushed out a year. And in place of that, in the near term, in 2025, we expect, I think our model says, the slowest growth since in 80 years.
Nationally, and we're on pace for population loss in BC.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
So we'll see. We'll get some updated population numbers over the next week or so. But this really is just kind of pushing out this really challenging target of acknowledging a mistake with how the non-permanent resident program was run or not really run, and trying to correct it as quickly as possible. And I think creating some new problems along the way.
Also, maybe creating some opportunity for young workers, which we'll touch on in a moment, because I wanted to talk a bit about the jobs data that came out just a few days ago. And I put together this memo that I shared around the office. And so coming out of that, some notes were, I mean, at the headline level, big job gains, like unexpectedly high. What was the numbers? 54,000 net additional jobs in November across the country, almost entirely in the private sector, which is generally seen as good news. Those tend to be more productive jobs. We have been seeing over the past number of years a lot of growth in public sector employment, not necessarily displacing private sector job growth, but gaining more than we were seeing in the private sector. So that was welcome news. And we also saw big gains in the number of jobs held by people 15 to 24 years old, so that younger cohort. The unemployment rate fell nationally hugely from 6.9% to 6.5%. This is the first time it's been at that level since July of 2024, so almost a year and a half. So there's a lot of good news in there. A few points that require explanation or a bit more exploration. So 54,000 total jobs were added. If you look at part-time versus full-time, part-time grew by 63,000. So that means that the number of full-time jobs actually fell in November. So to the extent that people are choosing to work part-time, because there's all kinds of reasons you would. You might be in school and like you don't have any interest in being full-time. If part-time employment is growing because people would prefer full-time, but they just can't find a full-time gig, that's generally not a great thing. I don't know if you have any data on that.
Yeah, so the share of people working part-time who want to work full-time but are unable to has been growing for the past 18 months or so. But the last couple of months, it's actually been falling. So it's a higher share of people working part-time who want to work part-time, either because of other stuff going on in their life or whatever the reason is. So that number has actually been falling the past couple of months.
So in addition, if you look at how people are feeling about the job market, feelings, we don't talk about feelings very much on this podcast or in our jobs, do we? So the proportion of people feeling secure in their jobs is at about 74%, which sounds pretty good. Like 3 out of 4 people feel pretty good, but it is down 4 percentage points from the last time people were asked this question through this labor force survey, which was a couple years ago. So that if that's our baseline, people feel a little less secure today.
It's not bad though for how
I was actually surprised.
Yeah.
the global
uncertainty.
uncertainty.
The word of the year.
Our favorite word.
I thought that number would be closer to like 50% to 2/3.
Yeah.
Mm.
I thought it would have been a bigger
Yeah.
decline there. But so you can take what you want out of that,
Mhm.
that data point. The proportion reporting feeling like it would be easy to find a new job at a similar salary. So this one's not as good. Is about just over 40%. That says that maybe people are hunkering down where they are. They kind of look around, they go, well, I hope maybe they're feeling really optimistic about keeping their job, maybe overly optimistic. But yeah, they look around and say, maybe the opportunities aren't out there for me. So that's down 6 percentage points from 2 years ago. So I think those are things to watch. Those are sort of below the surface measures of what's happening in the labor market and of economic performance that I think matter. But again, at a high level, we're seeing fairly good numbers. That 15 to 24-year-old group.
Yeah. So it's been really tough, not just in Canada, but countries around the world for that age group. And we had seen a lot of deterioration in that space for again, about 18 months or so. But we've now seen that participation rate for 15 to 24-year-olds is rising past couple months. And by the way, for everyone 15 plus, it actually fell quite a bit last month. That's part of the reason the unemployment rate came down, was fewer people actually participating in the labor force. 15 to 24-year-olds up. The employment rate, the share of all 15 to 24-year-olds working, up the last couple of months. And the share of 15 to 24-year-olds working part-time who want to be working part-time, the past couple months. Right. So all of these things sort of trending more positively for that age group. Still, these numbers are, it's like the best since April of 2024, but not great historically, but definitely positive trends for that age group for sure.
And yeah, possibly tied to, I mean, we haven't connected this directly, but possibly tied to the immigration policies that relates to the non-permanent residents, those temporary foreign workers, in construction and retail and food services, who are now starting in net numbers, starting to leave Canada, that may be at the margin opening up some opportunity for younger workers. For Whistler, the local job market, I don't think it matters that much for Whistler.
I mean, we all need jobs.
We all need jobs, but in terms of if you look at price points and the types of properties that are transacting there and who the buyers are, do you see much of a connection between like how the local Vancouver economy is doing and what's happening in Whistler?
Yeah, I mean, let's be frank, it's a luxury to own in Whistler. It's more of a want than a need. Housing in Vancouver is more of a necessity. So what we deal with up there is a different caliber of purchaser that, this is a second home in most instances. So we're not seeing the same focus on everything going on in the world. They're not coming to Whistler to look at homes unless they have the ability to do that. But I mean, at the same time, it's when people are thriving in Vancouver, that is when they're purchasing in Whistler. And it's a funny disconnect right now because everything you're saying kind of points to things being softer, but we're still seeing a lot of sales happening in Whistler and Squamish and the Sea to Sky corridor. So so it's a kind of its own little world there. But I mean, Squamish, yes, the labor market's definitely a fact. And, where people work really matters because that dictates where they need to live. Not people that are going to have to work, 2 hours away from Squamish aren't going to live in Squamish. So it's just, there's a lot of factors that play into that. But yeah, I mean, Whistler on its own is not as affected by the labor markets in Vancouver.
Yeah, Squamish, as you mentioned, obviously a very different type of market.
Yeah.
Where you have a lot of families choosing to move there or couples choosing to raise kids there. And there's still that value delta there where it makes sense. Like if you're looking for something, quote unquote, affordable, relatively affordable in this market, then, Squamish is a good option.
For sure.
But most people are working and engaged in the local economy.
And I mean, Whistler's, you're buying there for a lifestyle. So part of it is lifestyle. It's not just about, how expensive the home is or, there's a huge lifestyle component that you also take into consideration when you're purchasing in Whistler. And that's usually why people come there.
That also means for you as an advisor, the exercise of pricing a home, like whether you're working for an owner who's listing or you're representing buyers, is that you operate mostly in Whistler now, but is that exercise different there than it is in other markets that maybe are guided by fundamentals a bit more, in the sense that you really need to know who your seller is and what motivates them, and the same for the buyers?
Correct. But also it's very hard to explain to a buyer that's not familiar, but all of Whistler is you can drive the whole thing in 15 minutes. And it's very hard to wrap people's head around the value of, say, one neighborhood that is the same house as another neighborhood that could be double the price. And, when you're looking at it from a broad picture, you're like, how can these be such different prices? So it's very important to work with a local person that understands the values of every single neighborhood. And it comes down to such micro elements, like how close you are to be able to ski from your door versus you're going to drive to the ski hill. All these factors that come into play. But yeah, when you're listing a home there, it's you have to know every little bit. And it's also so dictated on the inventory at the time. There is times where I'm like, now is not time to list this house. And it's going to sound crazy, but I'm like, there's 8 homes that are in this price bracket.
Which is
too
many.
That is a lot.
Yeah.
So we wait for a few of those to sell before we list your house. Because the average buyer that comes to Whistler, they're maybe there for a weekend to look. And they're going to buy, it's not their full-time home most of the time. They buy the best of what they've seen that day. They're not spending weeks and weeks and weeks hunting for that perfect home necessarily, because A, there's not a lot to choose from in Whistler. Our corridor is small. But B, it's a second home 9 times out of 10. And, I live there. So obviously there is people that live there, 15,000 of us approximately, that do look for the perfect home for themselves. And, we deal with those buyers as well. And that's a different search altogether, because, instead of looking for how to be the village the quickest or how to be on the ski hill the quickest, it's like, oh, how quick can my kid get to school? Can they take the valley trail? How close are we to the lake? Those factors matter to people. So yeah, it's a very small market, but it's super important to understand every single neighborhood and how they differ from each other and what they offer to each individual purchaser. Because some people are in Whistler for summer. We have more visitors now in the summer than we do in the winter.
That's when I go.
Yeah. People love the lakes, the golf courses, the valley trail, restaurants. We have unbelievable restaurants now. But the skiing population, they're buying they're buying now. And they're buying a different product than somebody coming in the summertime.
Local expertise always matters.
Yeah, you got to hire local.
Especially so in Whistler.
Yeah.
So
it's very important.
So just to wrap here. So, when we look at the jobs data, there's more good than not.
And a few months in a row of more good than not.
Yeah. It does feel like we might be slowly turning a corner here. And then we even had Q3 GDP data come out recently. It said that we technically narrowly avoided a recession in quarters in the middle of the year. Yeah, I mean, it's just, listen, before we get too excited, our economy essentially stalled over that period, but it didn't contract for 6 months. So I guess that's good news. So the Bank of Canada is meeting on December 10th. By the time you're watching or listening to this, you will know what they've done. We are not privy to that at this point. What do you think the bank's going to do, given the totality of the data and information we have now on the economy?
I mean, they'll hold. I think, take them at their word that they plan to hold. There's been no recent data releases to kind of put them off that course. Yeah. They said, last time that if the economy continues to unfold the way they expect, there's no need to cut rates anymore. So they want to hold as long as possible here. They want to let some of these new policies kind of run their course. They want to see inflation come down a bit more. It's kind of a little bit sticky high in and around 2.5%. And so I think they really want to stay where they are at 2.25% for their policy rate.
Unfortunately, unlike in the United States, they're not feeling pressure from our head of state to lower rates when really they should be holding.
Yes.
For Whistler, we talked earlier about interest rates not mattering as much to that market. But you have a cool data point that you wanted to shoehorn in here.
Yeah.
Now, you're not going to go as far as to say, it doesn't matter what happens to rates in 2026, but what did you want to share?
Yeah, it doesn't affect Whistler as much because I went on a deep dive I did this recently to try and understand how many titles in Whistler actually have mortgages on them. And it came to a resounding 33 to 38%. And compared to Vancouver, which is closer to 60-ish%, I think a lot of this has to do with, there's a lot of homes that get passed down through families. They've been fully paid off. So yeah, when you're looking at will people be desperate to sell because of interest rates in Whistler, I don't think there's a lot of that going on. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are paid off.
Right.
So yeah, it's a different market altogether from that standpoint as well.
Yeah, it definitely serves as a stabilizer of the market. Metro Vancouver with 40% of households, essentially owner households not having a mortgage, it does create a bit of a buffer against rate fluctuations. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we've just gone through a period of rate fluctuations, and we know that did impact the market.
Yeah,
but probably mitigated what we saw to a certain extent.
I can't see lines of credit. I can't see what kind of debt people have taken on their home other than a mortgage. So obviously there could be a bit of that. But yeah, for the most part, and I do see it, people coming in, there's a lot of cash purchases happening.
The StatsCan mortgage-free data includes home equity lines of credit.
Oh, does it? Okay.
If you have a home equity line of credit, then you are not considered mortgage-free.
Perfect. Well, then that number is fairly accurate then.
So let's move on to the final segment here. We have a question from listener Lauren in Vancouver.
Hi Ryan and Ryan, this is Lauren from Vancouver. I know the market usually slows down at a little around the holidays, but is this the case in places like Whistler? It feels like a lot of buyers are kind of holding off right now, but I'm wondering if resort markets are behaving any differently.
I mean, technically, yes, over Christmas holidays, we do see a slowdown. Mm-hmm. It's when I try to, unplug a little bit. But it is also our busy season when lots of people are in town. And so it's actually a great time to have your home listed because it gets a lot of eyes on it. It's a great time to market homes in Whistler. We have a lot of bodies that come through Whistler at that time. So yes, it does. I would say sales aren't as prevalent, but it's a good time to have your home marketed because there's a lot of bodies that come through a resort town like Whistler.
I don't know what to call it, if it's your intuition or what, but the data support what you just said. So I pulled the sales on a quarterly basis for Whistler coming out of WLS.
Yeah.
And if you look at Q4 sales in each of the last 10 years versus the average quarterly sales in the first 3 quarters of the year, in 7 out of 10 years, the Q4 transactions were lower. Mm-hmm. So, and that's very typical of Whistler's a resort market, non-resort markets, the broader market. We typically see that. People are less interested in real estate around the holidays.
Yeah, and they're using their homes. They don't want to be bothered with showings. Yeah, and I always have to convince my sellers, it's a good time to stay on the market. Yeah. You don't need to, we can always schedule showings around your holiday, guests and everything. But for the most part, it's people aren't doing transactions over their Christmas holidays. They're focused on family and skiing and friends and enjoying Whistler.
Final question for you. What do you expect at the beginning of 2026 for Whistler, for that market? Anything like a continuation of what we've seen? Do you think there's maybe some renewed optimism? Do you expect the market to pick up?
Yeah, I honestly think actually Q4, your numbers probably say it's down, but I do feel like I'm one of those people that tries not to focus on the headlines because it can be negative right now, especially. And as a realtor, I was kind of saying earlier, I honestly, my call volume and my phone tells me a lot about what's happening, and it has been busy. And I'm honestly, even our office in Whistler, we've been trying to meet up to have an office meeting, and it seems like everyone's quite busy right now. So I do feel like things are improving. I think people are kind of settling into the new norm of what this global world is. The uncertainty isn't as uncertain as it once was. I think people are getting used to new norms, tariffs, all these things. And, and then again, the stock market has been fairly strong through all of this. So I feel like there is some confidence, and especially in a market like Whistler, like I was saying, it's fairly buffered by, even global things that happen. You're always going to have visitors. You're always going to have renters. You're always going to be able to nightly rent in many areas of our market. And for that, it is one of the safer places to invest in a home. And the perk of all of that is you also get the Whistler lifestyle with it. So yeah, I do see 2026 actually holding some strength, if not more than 2025. And that's just what I'm feeling. I'm not
Valid.
looking at the overarching, because as we learned on this podcast today, we don't act the same as other places.
That's
There's
right.
these micro markets within the overarching market that act entirely different for their own reasons. So
Great.
That they do.
We'd love to answer your real estate questions. You can email us at intel@rennie.com, or you can leave a voicemail at speakpipe.com/the Rennie podcast, and we'll try to respond in our next episode. Carleigh, before we wrap up, any final advice for anyone who's considering selling or buying?
yeah, I mean, like I said, it's all relative. If you're selling to buy in a similar market, don't be afraid of it. Take the advice of your realtor on pricing, even if it feels lower than 2 years ago, because you're buying in also lower than 2 years ago. So I think it's important to stay in your markets. I don't see this deflation lasting forever. We live in one of the most beautiful places in the world. You look at all the turmoil happening elsewhere. We're very, very fortunate to be here. And I think the outcome of that will show in real estate prices in the future. And we just have to be patient. I think that's an important factor in this market is patience.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And if anyone who's listening or watching, wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
choffman@rennie.com is my email. Otherwise, I'm quite active on Instagram. My handle is @RealtorCarl. And yeah, feel free to reach out for anything you need. Whistler, Squamish, even Vancouver.
Amazing.
I mostly lean on these guys, though, for the intel. So
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah.
And thanks for being here.
yeah,
Really
thank you
great
for
to have
having me.
finally.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Awesome.